Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve Podcast. Today's guest is the founder and CEO of Revolancer. His name is Karl Swanepoel. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. Thanks for having me. How are you?
It's a pleasure to have you, man. I'm doing very well. It's been a while since I've done a show in the morning. Like, this sounds strange for anyone that's new to the show, because a lot of the time when I do this show, I tend to have guests maybe like, say, stateside, and they're in a completely different time zone. So I've got to kind of like try and adjust accordingly. And I mean, I don't mind either way. I love just doing this show, but you do have to kind of adjust yourself a little bit. And, like maybe I'm caning a bit too much coffee around 5, 6 p.m. So it's nice to do it in the morning for a change. But yeah, anyway, let's just jump straight into you, man. I want to kind of get behind who you are a little bit more, because I love the idea that you've got with this company. There's a lot of ground we can cover. Just to give you a bit of background on me, I've got a marketing background. I've been in the industry for several years, and I've worked in business, studying business all my life. I've always been a bit of a big business nerd fan, if that's a thing. I don't know, just a fan of business. That's a thing, isn't it? Yeah, people like things like Shark Tank and whatever, so that you can be a fan of business. Anyway, talk us through the beginning of your business career up until this point. So walk us through, because I saw on your LinkedIn and various other places online that you've kind of got quite a story career. There's a lot of different industries you've worked in and different levels and stuff, but walk us through in your own words your career so far.
Sure. I guess hard to think of exactly when it started, but I guess, right at the beginning where it started was when I was 13, I decided that I wanted to be my own boss and that I never wanted to work for anyone else. I don't know why I decided that, but I had a very strong belief there and it really stuck around. So quite quickly, I realized I needed to take it very seriously, because that's not an easy thing to pull off. So I started by trying to make money online. I found freelancing platforms, so I started freelancing on there. Quickly grew unhappy with how these platforms operated. So I decided to start my own freelancing platform at the age of 15. Started it with about £200, kind of a crazy story behind that. But in the end, I had to sell it because I was too young to have a PayPal account, and they wouldn't let me, they wouldn't let me keep operating it. So I sold that just before my 16th birthday. And yeah, since then I've been involved in a few other projects. So mainly kind of a marketing and web agency that I started. Had an office on my local high street. That was again a really stupid idea, because the rent, ate all of what would have been profit, and we could have easily run it remotely.
That's something I want to ask you right off the bat. What do you make of remote, like the idea of just, say, companies not having a physical location? Because a lot of the companies I've worked for in the last, say, year and a half would either rent out like a WeWork space or something like that, or they just wouldn't have an office at all. It'd be completely remote. And I'm with you. I think as far as business costs are concerned, unless you, for some reason, have to have a physical location to sort of operate out of, I don't see why you should invest that money there. I mean, a lot of the companies I worked for in the past, you could tell it's all about like, oh, we want to have the big swanky office in the city location to show off. I get that. But at the same time, why? You know what I mean? Like, it's like, I think it's much more impressive to be like, hey, look at these spreadsheets. look how well we're doing. But yeah, no, I mean, just, yeah, let's talk about it. I mean, what okay, let's rephrase the question a little bit. Obviously you were paying a lot of money for, something that you weren't really getting something out of, but were there any other things that kind of twigged you to think, okay, maybe remote working is better, it's a better option for me?
Well, I mean, COVID was a big part of it. This was just before COVID.
Okay.
Getting an office was very much a vanity metric.
Right.
I wanted an office because I was 18 at the time, and I thought, I have my office. The local newspaper took a big interest in that too.
Right.
Did like a big piece on the 18-year-old that got an office. But in hindsight, it was such a silly thing to do. And now where we could very easily get an office, and we have a much larger team at Revolancer. We don't have an office. We work completely remotely, but then we meet up every couple of months and kind of rent an Airbnb or something and just kind of get together and brainstorm things together. So that seems to be quite a nice balance.
Yes, and it's interesting as well because right there you said like an Airbnb somewhere cool, like probably like a house setting or something like more relaxed. Like I personally feel like you can get so much more done from home, and in the companies that I worked for over the years, you know, a lot of the time you have like a hybrid model, which I think it works. You know, if you've got like a physical location, sometimes it's nice to go into an office or meet up with a team. You know, I totally get that, but I don't know, like there are some places that I worked where like I actually I remember one place I worked, I had to actually go to a different floor of the building to get away from the noise because people were just so loud, and I was like, I can't get anything done here. But when I was at home, surprise, surprise, I got a lot more done. And I don't know if that's because of the noise factor or just feeling comfortable or whatever, but like I don't know, I think how the measures that you go to make your staff feel more comfortable, generally speaking, will at some point equate to more productivity. I mean, you know, it's like, obviously it depends where you're working, what the goal is, and, you know, if people are invested in that vision. But at the same time, I don't know, I think it goes a lot further to make them feel comfortable rather than just being like, hey, here's that pinball machine in the middle of the office that we're never going to use. Like, you know, it's like, I don't know. I hate startup culture. I'm sorry. Just that element of it. Yeah, everything else is great. It's always fun to be part of something that's growing in the beginning stages. But I've seen a lot of like major companies replicate this, like bigger scale companies, and it's like, I don't know. For me, I feel the most important asset that you're going to have is the people in your company. That way, it always comes down to that because they're the people that make the vision happen. But anyway, let's move it forward. Talk us through specifically how Revolancer came to be. So you gave us a little bit of background behind, you know, your career up to this point and why you made the decision to kind of move in that sphere. But talk us specifically about this in particular business.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, it came from being a freelancer, realizing that freelancing platforms aren't serving freelancers right. That was back in 2014, 2015. I then started my own platform, sold that, then started working with clients directly, not via freelancing platforms. And then when COVID came, we were in a COVID lockdown in early 2021. I was looking at these freelancing platforms that I started my journey on, 6 or 7 years before that, and realized that they hadn't changed a thing. I already thought that they were massively outdated back in 2014, 2015, and they hadn't changed anything back in 2021. They haven't changed anything today, and they're just so set on their ways, and it's really not compatible with the way that we work remotely nowadays. So that's when I decided to start Revolancer and, do something about it.
So you're not the only company that's obviously offering a freelance platform, shall we say. I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's Freelancer, Upwork, a few other platforms, Fiverr, etc. And they all kind of vary as far as like what their particular offering is. I'm on some of those for things like voice acting and copywriting. And, I've had like some success for it, but not really. But that's just my personal experience. But something that kind of stood out to me is that you guys charge zero commission. And so I was like, okay, so how are you making your money? Without being too probing, but it is kind of my job. How are you making money? Is it through advertising, or is it like some sort of a freemium model where you pay for features down the line? Like, how exactly are you guys making your business?
Yeah, so it's a freemium model. We have an optional plan called Revolancer Plus, which just unlocks some extra features like being able to send more proposals to clients and a couple of other things. But the commissions being at 0%, it has another benefit too. So on a lot of these, in fact, all of the platforms that you mentioned and a few more of the very large freelancing platforms, they rely on commission fees. But because of that, they have to police how you communicate. So you can't video call, you can't talk off platform in any way, because then they won't get their revenue. So by removing commission fees, we can also allow people to work flexibly and not get in the way of their workflow.
What's your thoughts on that? I mean, like, let's say, for argument's sake, that someone did want to take business outside of your platform. How do you feel about that?
We don't care. We're sort of the platform
Hey,
exists. Well, the platform exists to get people new clients, not to
yeah.
sort of, worm our way into existing freelancer client relationships and just try and skim some money off of every single transaction. I don't think that's productive in any way.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I get why those companies are doing that, but at the same time, to me, it just feels like a lack of trust. It's like, all right, like you're gonna make some money out of it anyway, but like that's a bit. Like, I think if nothing else, it should be. It could be restructured in a way, couldn't it? You could sort of say like, okay, you can either pay this amount, and we basically get you together, and you may not have contacted each other previously, or may not have even been able to contact each other for whatever reason. So that's like one kind of, I don't know, benefit, I suppose, of being on that. And then, you could structure it in a way that instead of saying, oh, no, we're going to prevent you from being able to take conversation elsewhere, you could be like, well, how about we help you to facilitate a better conversation? We give you tools, we give you resources that, would make it better for you to stay on this platform and use it, as opposed to taking your business elsewhere. I mean, I got to say, like, it always comes down to trust, doesn't it? And especially between business to consumer. Like, I know in this sense, it's a company sort of being like the middleman, but I don't know. I think I like your approach a bit better. I think it's just better to just get people together doing business, and by kind of being less on their shoulders, I think they're more inclined to then take up a model such as yours with the plus model. It's like you like the service, you're like, oh, you know what? Maybe I will pay for that, rather than I don't know. I think there's something to that. But anyway, for people who are nervous about the prospect of freelancing, in your opinion, why should they consider freelancing?
I mean, I'd have to know why they're nervous about it, I suppose. But I'd say freelancing, it's a great way to work flexibly and kind of be your own boss. I think it's very similar to entrepreneurship, and I think there's a funny meme that always circulates on LinkedIn where it's like, I didn't want to work a 9 to 5, now I work 24/7.
Right.
So it's not necessarily like easier or more flexible in some ways than working a 9 to 5. But I think what it comes down to is the same question I ask myself with why being an entrepreneur is definitely the right thing for me, which is, you have to ask yourself, what is worse for you? Is it worse for you to be stressed, or is it worse for you to be bored? And for most people, it's worse to be stressed. And that's why, most people are happier with a kind of a 9 to 5. But for me, it's much worse to be bored. So what I'm doing, I probably get more stressed doing this than I would doing some kind of mundane, safer kind of job. But I'd be bored out of my mind, and that to me is worse. So I'd say similar for freelancing.
Something you said at the beginning of the show kind of stood out to me with relation to this. You said that, you wanted to work for yourself. You just knew from day one. For me, I realized through the course of working for various companies that for whatever reason, I don't like being told what to do. Now, I'll put a caveat to this. It's not that I have an issue with someone telling me what to do. It's more an issue of, let's suppose you're in a meeting room and that the thing that your boss is suggesting won't work. For whatever reason, maybe you and your team have tried this. By the way, this comes from personal experience. I'm not just making this up. So that this thing isn't going to work. And your boss says, yeah, but, we're going to do this anyway. And you're like, why? And they just say, oh, we just do it. So you go, okay, you do what your boss tells you, right? And then it doesn't work. And then several months later, you go to review, inevitably. And they're like, oh, I don't understand. You're like, well, if we'd have done it this way that I suggested, it would have worked. And therein, you get a lot of arguments like that happening, and that's what bothers me. Nothing else. No, I don't care about egos. I don't care about, being the boss. To be honest, I hate leading most of the time. I'll do it if I need to, but like, I just like being part of a team where what you say and do is valued, and it's a bit like, do you know, it's a bit like being in a band, I think, in some ways. And hear me out with this analogy, but if you play for the song will be better. If you play for yourself, it's probably going to suck. And I feel like a team setting is a lot like that. It's like if you're thinking about the project overall and what will work for the project, and you think about how your contributions will help or potentially hinder that, and then you're thinking more about the project at large, and it's probably more likely to succeed. But then if you're just thinking about yourself, or you're just trying to get your ideas in, I don't know, be the best salesperson of the particular quarter, like eventually it's going to come back to bite you. And I don't know. I think that because of that, that's maybe why we're seeing a lot more people going down the freelance route, because you're actively managing yourself. And as you pointed out before, you know, the reality is it is a kind of a 24-hour gig. I mean, I've been self-employed now for quite some time, and you know, I go back and forth. Sometimes I go into roles where, you know, I'm back working with people again, and then other times I'm just doing project to project. And right now I'm actively like searching for work all the time, and it's that in of itself is a job, just searching for work. So it's invaluable to have platforms such as yours where it's, you know, actively trying to put people together. And that's really what it is putting freelancers with, you know, clients, businesses, whatever, and getting a dialogue going and doing business the way it really should be done. Because again, like, you know, I've worked with companies where instead of maybe taking on a freelancer or taking on a company and just kind of working with them for a particular project or an ongoing project, they just rather employ someone, which it has its benefits and its weaknesses. But I think sometimes it is better to just look at the project and go with that, rather than, you know, just taking someone on board and going, okay, well, we got them for 40 hours. What can we use that with? And it's just a different way of approach. I'm not saying necessarily it's completely wrong, but in my experience over the years, it's always been better when you just focus primarily on ways to achieve that project, and, you know, be that bringing in some extra manpower to do that, or, you know, maybe just trialing a new type of technology such as like analytics and stuff, and doing it that way, whatever, you know. Anyway, let's move it forward. In your opinion, what are the most common mistakes that freelancers should be aware of or should avoid?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely around the pricing side, I think, because what'll happen oftentimes is, you know, it's certainly true in my experience and in conversations I've had with other freelancers, is, let's say you're speaking to a client, they ask you, you know, how much will it cost to, I don't know, build me a website. You say, you know, you look at the brief, everything, you say £2,000. They say, oh, sorry, I've only got 1,500. Would you do it for 1,500? And then you say yes. And that's a terrible, terrible thing to do. Because, you know, you might think, oh, okay, you know, I'm still getting paid, I don't know, £50 an hour or whatever to build this or whatever. But you've now taught that client to, you know, that they can expect you to compromise and completely devalue your services. So the right way to respond to a question like that isn't to turn the client down, but the right way to respond to that is, let's say I say to you, you know, I'll build you a 10-page website for £2,000. And then you come back to me and you say, oh, sorry, I've only got 1,500. Would you do it for 1,500? You say, yeah, you know, I will do it for 1,500, but in that case, I can only build these 6 pages. You know, but if you increase to 2,000, then I'll build the full 10 pages. So even, you know, you always have to kind of like match your service to the price. And if they ask for a discount, you know, then also remove things that you're sort of offering to them. And that will make sure that, you know, your services are still valued at the price that they kind of should be. But it's very dangerous to start offering people discounts, because then they'll always expect that whatever price you quote them moving forward is negotiable.
Yeah, I agree. And I think also this is a kind of an important lesson from a negotiation standpoint, be it if you're trying to get more money from, you know, through wages or something like that, or always punch higher, always go way higher and work your way down. Don't undersell yourself. It's so important not to do that, because I mean, I think that's something that people forget often. Yeah, like if you're on a freelance platform or you're selling a service and you go lower than that, as you put it, you are compromising. And the price that you put out there is what you think your service and your time and your product is worth. So it's just as much about what you're selling as it is the reputation and the like the how people will look at what you're producing. You know.
And I mean, there's also another component to pricing. So this is a trap that I really fell into freelancing at quite a young age, because I was sort of thinking, if I build someone a website and I charge £500 for it, it might take me 10 hours to do, and that's £50 an hour, which, at the time is like an incomprehensible amount of, money. But then in reality, I'm completely underselling my services. And I was thinking about it completely the wrong way around. You shouldn't think about it as in like, what is that money worth to me? You should think about it, what is the value of your service worth to them? Because building them a website might mean that they triple their sales or whatever. And they go from, I don't know, 500K in sales to 1.5 million in sales. And at that point, what percentage of that is the website now worth? Probably you could argue £10,000 or more easily, right? So that's really the best way to think about it. Don't think about it as in, like how much do you need per hour to get by? Think about what kind of increased value are they getting from your services and price it according to that.
I think another good thing to think about as well is like what the market average is saying for the service that you're charging for. So like what I think is not necessarily like, oh, I should just charge what everyone else is charging, but look at your skill set. Let's say you're a computer programmer. Okay, well, how long have you been doing that? 5-10 years. Okay, you do front end, back end. Okay, great. All of these different things are going to drive up the price that you could feasibly charge, because your expertise and your knowledge is obviously worth that much more. And when you compare to what everyone else is doing in the market, you can kind of see like, okay, well, this person has been in the industry for 5 years and they've worked on these projects and this is how much they're charging. I maybe have 7 years experience. I've got a bit more than them. And I also know how to do this, this, and this. So I could probably charge this much more. I think that's always an important thing to think about as well, because if you undersell yourself, again, just to repeat this, and there's people in the market who are charging more, imagine how that kind of makes you seem. It's like you not only are underselling yourself, but you don't sort of believe in your ability as much. And I think that can sometimes send an inadvertent bad message to the client, because they're going to be like, well, why are they like, don't they understand? Have they not done their research? And it's like alarm bells start going off. You're like, because you absolutely should do your research. Like one thing that freelancers tend to do is raise their prices every year. And obviously that tends to kind of go with things like inflation and just generally like moving things up, the cost of living, everything increases. But I think it's also important because they're looking at what the market is saying, going, yeah, no, I need to charge more for this. And like, when I do my voiceovers and my voice acting, sometimes I'll look at what the project is saying. So if it's someone that doesn't have a particularly big budget, I'll tend to ask what their budget is and then measure that against the work that's being produced. And sometimes I will actually turn down a project if it's, if they're charging, let's say, a really, really small flat fee, but they want me to do a lot of work. It's like, it might not be sort of workable for me. But then other times, sometimes it's just about the project. It can be like, well, this is a project I really want to work on. So, I'll take this, I'll do this. I think particularly when you're in your beginning stages, like I've been at things like voice acting and acting for a number of years now, but I'm still very much in the infancy stage. So I'm still trying to build up my portfolio and get somewhere with it. And I think in that stage, it's like, to some extent, you should take on as many projects as you can get, just so you've got that under your belt, so that when you get to, say, the next year in your freelancing journey, you can be like, okay, well, now I can choose to be a bit more selective with this. Now I can kind of start thinking a bit more about what I'm charging, what my time is worth, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Lots of things to think about. Thank you for that. You aim to revolutionize freelancing by putting freelancers first. How do you aim to achieve that?
Well, I mean, it comes through, lots of different kind of policy on the site. So not charging commission fees, allowing people to speak outside the platform. From kind of a brand ethos perspective, we're completely, putting freelancers first. And it's important that a freelancing platform does that, because by really prioritizing freelancers and giving them everything they need to do their best work, ultimately, then we create the best supply of freelancers for clients. So, by nurturing your supply, you offer the best product or service to your demand side. So it makes no sense to me whatsoever how other large freelancing platforms prioritize the demand side so much at the expense of freelancers, because ultimately they're just harming both sides. But if you prioritize the supply side, you can create a better service for your demand side. And there is actually an example of this working too, which is a platform called Rightmove that you might have heard of. So they completely dominated their space by not focusing on home buyers, but by focusing on estate agents. And that way, by really pleasing estate agents, they got the most high quality listings. And ultimately, that's most useful to a home buyer. So they became the biggest player in their space, and we're doing something very similar in the freelancing space as well.
So it's such a basic thing, isn't it? Understanding your market, and just like I remember in business school when I first started getting into business, they would just hammer that point. It's like, understand your market, know your market, and it's like if you don't understand that, you're just not going to get anywhere with it. You're just going to constantly be butting your head against the wall going, I don't understand why it's not working. I don't understand. And it's like, sometimes it's not even about like being the cheapest platform or being, having the most of something. Sometimes it is just about being accessible, about, making the right kind of partnerships and connections. And then in that, you get things like the best listings for a particular industry that you're working in. With regards to, setting up Revolancer and other businesses that you've set up over the years, what would you say have been sort of the biggest challenges? I guess where we're coming at with this question is kind of, as an entrepreneur, what would you say are the biggest challenges for you over the years?
It's been quite a lot of different things, but I think the best piece of advice I can give, and something I have followed for a long time and continue to follow, is that you need to surround yourself with people who are better than you at certain things. So, for example, fundraising. With Revolancer, it's the first time that I raised funds from a VC, from angel investors, that kind of thing. I had no idea what I was doing. So I spoke to people who had previously fundraised for their startups. I spoke to angel investors, not trying to get them to give me money, but just trying to get them to give me feedback. Would this be something you'd invest in? Or if not, why not? How can I improve this? And then through those conversations, I put together a really good kind of pitch, really good narrative. And then when I went out to fundraise, I managed to do so, relatively easily, even though it's not something I ever did before. So I faced lots of challenges, but the way that I always approach them is by learning from the expertise and experiences of other people who have faced challenges like that in the past and overcame them.
Speaking of getting advice and feedback from people, I found on your LinkedIn that you're regularly advised by the JustEat co-founder. So I wanted to understand how this business relationship came to be and what have been the main things you've learned from it.
Sure. It's actually a very funny story. It comes back from that office that I rented. It's the one good thing that came out of that, and why I don't regret doing that at all. And basically, I mentioned that this office that I had was really good at attracting the attention of the local newspaper, and they did like a big spread about me on the front page of their business. It's for a tiny town's local newspaper, so it's nothing that impressive.
It's still impressive, man.
Well, some people read it locally, and one of them was this guy. So I got an email at one point, from a guy called Matt Brady. I had no idea who he was. I, for whatever reason, didn't Google him either. He just said he's like an entrepreneur in the local area and would like to meet up. So I met up with him. I invited him over to my office, and within about 30 seconds of chatting to him, I realized like who he was and what experience he had. He was the founding CMO of JustEat, and probably the reason why you know what JustEat is. So, immediately I was like, no matter what, I have to maintain this contact. So I made sure I got him on WhatsApp, kind of spoke with him on and off for, I think it was about 3 years before I started Revolancer, where I didn't have a project that I had like various different projects I now and then asked his advice on and just checked in every couple of months. But when it came to actually starting Revolancer, I then reached out to him because I maintained that connection. And I asked him if he wanted to be an advisor. And he said, no, he is far too busy. He can't, but good luck. And then every 2 weeks from that, I would send them a list of updates. So I'd say, oh, now I've spoken to these people. I've done this. I worked out this. I'd just send him a list of updates on WhatsApp every 2 weeks. He ignored me. He just read it and ignored me, every 2 weeks. Then after about 2 months of doing this, I sent him a message and was just like, hey, because I was preparing for a startup competition at the time, and it was like a week away or something. And I just said to him, hey, this competition is in 1 week. Are you sure you don't want to call real quick? Like, have a look at my pitch. By the way, are you getting my messages? And he replies to me and says, yes, but I'm ignoring you. And then basically I convinced him to get on a call, showed him what I was planning to do. And then I managed to convince him to be an advisor for Revolancer, and he has been for the past 2 years, since like right near the start. So yeah, it's been incredible working with him. He's a very direct guy. He made my first ever board meeting a very memorable experience, in not the best way, but his advice.
You gotta tell me why, man. Come on.
Oh, he just absolutely ripped me to shreds in front of all of my, new investors shortly after our first funding round.
Oh no!
Yeah.
Well, in a kind of like this is what you need to work on next time, kid, like sort of thing, or just.
Yeah, well, he was sort of looking at our updates and was just like ripping holes into everything and saying, why are you prioritizing this? Why aren't you doing this? And just like really direct, kind of antagonistic. It's his personality. He's a really great guy though. But every single piece of advice he's given me that I followed has led to really great things happening for the business. So yeah, he's a wonderful person to have around.
Awesome, man. And well done for your consistency with that. It must not be easy to kind of continually get ignored, and then finally, like, you make something out of it. I mean, it kind of weirdly reminds me of that scene in The Shawshank Redemption where what's his name, Andy, keeps sending out the letters, and he's doing it for a long time, and then he eventually gets somewhere with it, and then he continues to do it thereafter. It's like there's something to be said for that, I think. I mean, much like this show that I'm doing now. I mean, I've been doing this nearly 3 years, and the numbers are slowly getting there. But I think the biggest thing that's blown my mind is just like all the different types of guests I'm getting on this show. You know what I mean? People reaching out, such as yourself, who want to be on the show, and I'm just like really taken back, because it's like, for me, I just started this, sometime during 2020, just because I wanted to do a podcast, and I didn't really have a particular vision for it. Now I do. Now the story, I suppose, for the show is to kind of share other people's life lessons and stories and journeys, and kind of deliver something that is somewhat inspirational to people, or motivational, or even just funny, and sometimes, whatever. But it took a while to kind of realize that vision and that goal, I suppose. And it's something I'm always working on. And now it's like more fun than ever. And it's funny to think about, because, sometimes you do get bogged down with things. It can be frustrating. It's not always where you want it to be. But then you have these small successes, and then it's like stages, isn't it? Everything comes down to that. And business is completely like that. You've got stage 1, stage 2, or quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4. And then before you know it, you're at the top, and you're like, oh, wow, like, I remember when this was going nowhere. What changed? And it's like a lot changed. You changed, and your approach and your mentality and your approach, attitude, everything. That's really what changed, and that's what makes the success, I think.
Yeah, completely agree.
What advice could you give to aspiring entrepreneurs, just in general? Like, I know you've given a little bit throughout the show, but like, let's say someone who's just such as yourself, you started at a young age. Let's start there, actually. For any sort of young budding entrepreneurs, what would your advice be?
Don't be afraid to fail and just be very persistent. I mean, most of everything that I've tried has failed. I have experience in a lot of different fields as a result of that, though. I've tried everything. I've tried selling on eBay. I've flipping things. I've tried drop shipping. I've tried setting up marketplace businesses. I've tried setting up agencies, freelancing, everything, all kinds of different things. An app. So like even though most of these things that I just mentioned to you failed, I now have a basic underlying understanding of how they work, and also more importantly, what went wrong on my side. So if I wanted to try any of these things again, I would have an advantage where I'd probably be able to get it to a success faster because I failed. And I think that's the best way to think about failing. It's a learning experience, and so don't be afraid to fail. Especially if you're young, you have much less to lose. So just really go for it. Try as many things as possible, and you'll learn so much from that eventually you'll be able to be successful, and you'll be able to replicate it, because it won't be luck. It'll be from all of your hard work and all of your learnings from things that didn't work out in the past.
Let's explore that a little bit, the concept of failure. One thing I always like to do when I have my business guest on is not just sit and just ask like, oh, how did you achieve this success? Like, I like to get down to the root of the person, because I feel like that is always kind of the most important factor, because it's all the qualities of that person that help them get to where they eventually got to. So speaking to failure, in those moments when you failed, particularly in the moments when you put a lot into it and then it didn't work out, and you had to kind of pick yourself back up again, what kept you going? What was the thing that kind of kept pushing you forward and made you kind of overcome failure?
I think it's just that this was really what I wanted to do. I really wanted to, and I mean, it's one, because it's really what I wanted to do, and two, just because I enjoyed the journey of it. Even if things didn't go great, I still enjoyed just trying lots of different things, learning from them. So I think, it's a combination of that. It's that I really wanted to achieve the goal down the line, and had a very strong desire to do that, but also that I really just enjoyed the journey and the day-to-day of things. But that, with that being said, there were times where I was very close to thinking, things just keep going wrong. Now it's time to, just stop with this and find something else. So if I could go back in time, this is what I would say to myself, like, don't be afraid of failing. Like, all of this actually builds up to being able to do something really amazing at a young age, because I failed with most of everything I did over the past 10 years. It means now at 23 I've got a venture-backed business and been able to achieve a number of nice things, but most of everything I've tried again has failed, but it led up to this. So that's what I wish I could go back and tell myself. And I think it's important for anyone at any point in their journey, but especially at the beginning, it's very important to understand that.
Brilliant. Got a couple of questions for you about the future. So let's start with freelancing, and then we'll get back to you. So what do you think is the future of freelancing as it stands right now?
Well, I think that this is a booming kind of market. I mean, today, like right now, it might surprise you that about a third of the global workforce are freelancers, 1.56 billion people.
Okay.
Also, by according to McKinsey and Company, according to their projection, by 2027, more than half of the US workforce will be freelancers. So it's a space that's growing very fast. I think it's appealing to a lot of people. I think the current, the kind of after effects of COVID, the, impending economic kind of crisis is all fueling this as well. So I think that moving forward, we're going to have a much more kind of freelance-based, flexible way of working for a huge amount of the workforce than we even do currently.
What do you think are the implications of that for companies? How do you think that traditional companies that are offering, say, the 9-to-5, which, by the way, I know we've been quite critical of the 9-to-5, but like I think there are a lot of positives to be argued for 9 to 5s. I think it always generally comes down to the type of person you are and what your goals are and what you want. But one thing I will say about both freelancing and 9 to 5 is there is this illusion of job security. There is no such thing as job security. Sometimes you get lucky and you have good business working relationships with people, but yeah, I've seen it time and time again. I'm sure you've seen it as well. People can work for companies for years and years, and suddenly you're gone. We've seen it most recently with Google. Some people have been let go after 16 years. Yeah, basically setting up the company, and now they're gone. And it's the harsh reality of business. But I think it teaches us a valuable lesson. It's not necessarily a negative thing. I actually think it's a positive thing. If you learn that there is no job security, therefore you should be taking more risks and putting yourself out there and trying to kind of sell yourself more. Like, I think that's something that's really good about the freelancer mindset, is it teaches you how to look at yourself from the perspective of, okay, these are the different things I can offer. I shouldn't undersell myself. I should kind of throw myself out there. I should be bold. I should go for things that maybe I think I'm not good enough for, because chances are you are good enough. You just need to believe in yourself. And then the rest of it just comes down to like simple marketing and just sales, really, isn't it? It's just like knowing how to, what is it Paul Heyman says in the wrestling industry? Accentuate the positives and hide the weaknesses. Or if you need to talk about the weaknesses, then work on them and try and get better.
Yeah, I mean, and ultimately you're just more in control, because a lot of these Google employees were the way they found out they'd lost their jobs, they just couldn't log into their system. Some of them while they were currently on work trips meeting clients and stuff like that. So you just have more control. So even if if you're going to have enough client work, what you can do to increase it. So you're just in control more. And I think that's quite appealing. And I'm stealing this quote. I can't remember who said it. But there's a great quote where I'm just trying to think who said it. I don't really want to steal the quote. But yeah, it's basically if not taking any risks is the biggest risk you'll ever take. And I think it's a very important thing to realize. Like choosing not to do something is in itself a choice, or like choosing not to try with something is a choice in and of itself. And you're kind of guaranteeing, and if you're scared that if you try something that you'll fail, not trying guarantees that you'll fail at, achieving that thing. So, yeah.
I'll add to this as well, because I'm trying to become an actor and a voice actor. And, that's a very tough industry to make it in. I'm very aware of that. I know the odds are stacked against me. But one thing I will say, speaking to risk and trying, is that, I've tried to be successful, and I've tried to kind of do things like the standard 9 to 5 in marketing. I've tried to do customer service and all those things. I worked hard and I've made the best of them, but it just wasn't for me. I knew in my heart it wasn't for me, and that I needed to take a risk on myself and try these other things, because that was what would make me happy in life. But one thing that I've realized about fear and the concept of taking risks is a lot of the time it comes down to just people's concern about money. It's like, oh, how will I make money? How will I afford to pay the bills? And it's like, you will find a way. Like, there are so many ways to make money now. And sometimes you have to take a sucky job here and there to do it. But that's fine. It's in this book I started reading. I just finished it the other day. It's called Andy Nyman, The Golden Rules of Acting. Mm-hmm. They described the period between acting jobs as your resting period. And I love that idea. I think that's true in freelancing too. It's like, you might not always have loads of ongoing work, but that doesn't mean that you're a failure. If anything, it just gives you time to reevaluate what you're doing, tweak things, whether that's, I don't know, your CV, your portfolio, maybe even taking up a course or something, pitching ideas to clients, reaching out to connections of yours. There's always something you can be doing. And if you're not getting work, it's okay. You will find work in some shape or form, and you will get to where you want to get to. It just might take some time and some patience.
Yeah, absolutely.
A couple of quick fire questions for you, completely unrelated to our conversation today. This is just about you, Karl. in your life, what's the best advice you've ever received?
I mean, I'm going to sound very boring, but it really is this whole idea of just being very persistent and, just jumping into the deep end with everything that I try.
Brilliant. And what's the biggest life lesson you've learned so far?
That's a good question. Biggest life lesson. I think probably that if you help enough other people get what they want, you'll get what you want. I think it's a good philosophy. I think it's true as well. I think there are many very, very successful business people who people complain. I mean, people complain about billionaires with good reason in a lot of ways as well. But ultimately, there's a good chance that that very successful person got there by helping a huge amount of people solve their problem, or helping a smaller group of people solve a very big problem that they're willing to pay a lot of money to sort of have the solution for. So they are creating a lot of value, and I think it's a good philosophy in general to actively try and help other people, and then ultimately, it'll circle back to you as well.
Yeah, I agree. And also, I think it's just good to constantly be trying to work with other people. I mean, that's part of the reason why I do podcasting. Other than just loving doing this, I'm also trying to meet people and grow and get somewhere and learn things. And one thing I read in this acting, this is a brilliant book. You guys should really get this. Even if you're not an actor, it's just a good book in terms of life advice. But one of the things it speaks to is this idea that, you got to kind of look at everything that you're doing and break it down and kind of consider what it is that you're looking for in life and what you can change and where you can kind of move forward and put yourself in a better place where you can get those things. And there are various different things that you can do to change that, but ultimately it comes down to you and how you kind of budge yourself in a different direction in order to get that. And it always comes down to you. It always does. But it's like your attitude, your approach, and kind of reevaluating that at all times. And I think in this show today, we've explored that quite a lot. This idea of like looking at you and how you can tweak things and change things in order to get where you want to. But a lot of it comes down to the basics of being human, really, isn't it? It's a lot of the time it is things like you keep going, you keep believing, you keep trying, you pick yourself up, it won't always work out. I forgot my point before, but I've come back circle. One of the things that I like to do is connect with different people. And by doing that, I learn so much, and I'm then able to use that in other fields. And I think one of the things I discovered through podcasting is that I was able to have a conversation with someone and go back and forth. And there's so many little things that you learn through that. Sometimes it's your time to lead and to guide the conversation and speak more. Sometimes you take a seat and you listen more, and it's good, like knowing when to listen, when to talk, and also just kind of always putting yourself out there, always trying different things, even if it might not necessarily sound like it's going to work. Just try it. How do you know? How do you know until you tried? There you go.
Absolutely.
As we draw things to a close for today, do you have any upcoming projects or final thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Oh, I mean, we're building an interesting platform at the moment to help freelancers start their journey by exchanging skills. So, where you can kind of deliver work to other people, build your portfolio with real client work, and then exchange that for help with your brand. So consulting with a more experienced freelancer, getting a website built, getting some marketing done for you, that kind of thing, and really helping the community. And what we've found is that this already very frequently happens, and that the people who do it really enjoy doing it. So 9 out of 10 people who have exchanged skills before would do it again from our research. So that's a very exciting project, and hopefully just another step in permanently improving the freelancing space.
I wish you the best of luck. I think what you're doing with this company is brilliant, and it was one of the when your team reached out to me, like I was already interested anyway because I love having business guests on. It's always fun. It forces me to kind of draw on my experience, but also kind of approach it with a blank canvas and just learn something new from someone. And whenever it's something directly related to something I've done before, it's always particularly interesting for me because, there's always something new you can learn. Like if I take the marketing sphere as an example, every company I've ever worked for has a completely different approach to marketing. Sometimes you use like the same platforms, software, but it's always different. And that always comes down to the people that you're working with. And it just, it always blows my mind, and it's always keeps it fresh and interesting for sure. But thank you so much for appearing on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure, and hope to see you again in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks very much for having me.
And to the listeners of the Christian Reeve Podcast, as always, be safe, be well, and I'll see you in the next one.